Good morning and welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Committee taking place from the Walton Suite in the Winchester Guildhall. It is Wednesday the 17th of April 2024 and the time is 9:30 a.m. My name is Councillor Jane Rutter and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. To my right is Councillor Edwards, who is the Vice Chair of the committee. Around the table we have the other elected members of the committee and we are supported today by a number of officers. Lorna Hutchings, who is the service lead of the Built Environment, Daniel Lucas, our legal advisor, various case officers, starting with Catherine Watson, who sit over there, and Claire Buchanan from Democratic Services, who supports the committee and operates the recording equipment. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the Council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. Please can I remind everyone to ensure your mobile phones and any other electronic devices are on silent or preferably turned off entirely. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Please look at the handout provided on your chairs or on the information slides displayed as you walked in and during the breaks for further guidance about this meeting. To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, I ask that nobody calls out from the back of the room during the proceedings. In accordance with the public speaking protocols of the meeting, those who have registered to speak will be able to address the meeting for their allotted time. Finally, can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting? Those of you who have registered to speak, I will call you forward when it is your turn to make your contribution. Members of the committee may ask you questions of clarification, so please remain at the microphone until after members' questions. The microphone is turned on by pressing the button on the base of the unit, and a timer will appear on the screen to remind you of your remaining time. Before turning to the agenda proper, I would like to welcome particularly Councillor Frank Pearson this morning, who is deputising for Councillor Cunningham. Frank has been a councillor for 22 years and a member of this committee for at least 12 of those last years. We will be making a presentation at the end of this meeting, but I did just want to put on record our appreciation of Frank's contribution, particularly to the Planning Committee over those many years, and to express here our grateful thanks for such a wonderful record of service to his community. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. And this is also Councillor Chris Edwards' final planning committee, as he will be stepping down from the council this May. And whilst he has only been a member for 3 years, we also wish to place on record that we appreciate and very much value the contribution he has made. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Turning now to the agenda, we go to apologies and deputy members, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you've just expressed, it's apologies for absence from Councillor Cunningham with Councillor Pearson deputising. Thank you.
And declarations of interest, members. I need to declare a personal and prejudicial interest in respect of item 6, land to the rear of 74 and 76 Lovedon Lane, as the principal objector is a close colleague and friend. So I will recuse myself for that item, leave the room, and Councillor Edwards will chair the committee in my place. I also have to say that the one of the tree applications this afternoon is also in my ward, but I haven't discussed it or predetermined that in any way. Okay, any other declarations, disclosures of interest, members? Councillor Edwards.
To echo your words, Chair, the other of the tree applications this afternoon is in my ward, but I have had no discussions regarding it.
Thank you. We now go to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 13th of March this year. Can I see, are those minutes agreed as a correct record of the meeting, please, members? Agreed? Thank you very much. Right, the final thing to do before I leave the room is to accept the update sheet as an addendum to the report. So is that agreed, members? Agreed. Thank you very much. So we now turn to the planning applications, and I will hand over for the first item to my Vice Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we begin with item 6 on the agenda for this morning, 2301-375, land to the rear of 70. I'd like to begin by asking Catherine Watson to make the presentation, please.
Thank you. The application is for one single dwelling to the rear of 74 and 76 Lovedon Lane. Here we can see the location plan, so the access to the site leads from Lovedon Lane. Here we have the aerial view of the site. So to the east here is Lovedon Lane, and to the west along a street here is Friars Close, and then you can see the surrounding development in the area. Here's the proposed site plan, so we can see the location of the new dwelling. As I mentioned earlier, the access is from Lovedon Lane. It's using the existing access that is used by the current property on Lovedon Lane. There'll be parking to the front of that property and parking to the front of the new dwelling. And then we've got the detailed layout here. So we can see the dwelling, parking spaces, bin store and cycle storage, and garden space. Here we have the site access plan. I appreciate it's a little bit faint, but there's a red line leading from the access, showing the visibility splays. These splays are in accordance with the standing advice given by Hampshire County Council. And then we have the proposed plans and elevations. So as I say, it's a single story dwelling. It's 3 bedrooms, and it's a design of a traditional bungalow. And then we have the site section. So at the top, south to north street scene. So we can see number 1 Friars Close on the right, and then the new dwelling, which faces into the site. And then in the middle, we've got west to east. So the right hand side, we've got number 74 Lovedon Lane, and then the ground slopes down, and then we see the new side of the new dwelling. And then at the bottom, on the right hand side, we've got number 4 Friars Close, and then the new plot to the right of that. And here we have some site photos. So on the left hand side, this is the garden of number 76 Lovedon Lane. The hedge demarcates the boundary with Friars Close, and the new access will be constructed. The new access track will be constructed adjacent to that. On the right hand side, the fence marks the boundary between number 74 and 76 Lovedon Lane. The new dwelling will be built across the width of both of those plots. And then here we have some views from Lovedon Lane. So on the left hand side where the van is parked, that will be where the access track runs down. And then on the right hand side, you can just see the pair of semi-detached properties on Lovedon Lane. And then again, from the rear on the left hand side, you can just see the pair of semi-detached properties and where the new access track will be. And then on the right, you can see the existing boundary hedge with a view of properties in Friars Close above that. So that completes my presentation. My recommendation is to permit subject to the conditions contained in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. We move on now to speakers and beginning with Christopher Pocock and Mike Collis. Would you come to the microphones, please? You have 3 minutes together to present your concerns. Have you agreed how you're going to divide the time between you? Yeah, great. And who's going to begin? Right, thank you, Dr. Pocock. So press the red button, or rather the button, the red light comes on, and when you start speaking, a timer will appear on the screen and you will be counted down for 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Christopher Pocock, owner of 1 Friars Close, which is on the boundary to this proposal. This proposal is very similar to a previously rejected application in the same existing gardens. The width of this large bungalow would be almost identical to the original proposal of 2 dwellings, which was rejected, as it still spans across 2 gardens. This proposal has detrimental effects on several neighbouring properties, as evidenced by the objections from councillors, the parish council and neighbours. We believe the location is not appropriate for the erection of any residential property, regardless of size. As noted by the case officer in the previously rejected application, proposals to build residential properties in this location do not fit in with the spatial character of this part of the settlement. There is no other residential development to the rear of the properties in this area of Loveton Lane. Building a large bungalow in 2 narrow gardens does not fit in with the Loveton Lane character of this area or Friars Close's character, and I therefore believe it to be contrary to policy DM15, DM16 and DM17 of the local plan. It is difficult to understand why the new report has now contradicted this original rejection using these same policies. Policy CP13 of the local plan requires developments to achieve a high standard of design that fits into the surrounding area. The application fails to recognise the character of the area, which is defined as ribbon development in the village design statement, and there is currently no existing access to this site contrary to the application.
Michael Collis, owner of 72 Loveton Lane. I'm also surprised by the change in the recommendation. Having 1 dwelling rather than 2 with the same footprint does not materially affect many of the objections. The driveway of 74 Loveton Lane ends in line with the front of our house. The proposal will result in multiple traffic movements by 2 cars the full length of our garden and within 1.08 metres of our living accommodation. My wife has multiple sclerosis and we plan to use the room nearest the fence of the bedroom. We will be adversely affected by noise and fumes. Kingsworthy Parish Council objection states both the proposed access and turning area would appear to provide insufficient space for large vehicles, including emergency vehicles, to safely access and leave into the site or onto Loveton Lane. Loveton Lane is a 40-mile-per-hour road used by heavy goods vehicles on a regular basis, as well as buses. EcoGen now have permission to double the HGV movements to 80 per day. The noise of reversing vehicles will be very intrusive. The close boarded fences and hedges are part of our boundary and owned by us, so cannot be part of their mitigation. Neither our neighbours nor the developers have consulted us at all. In summary, the majority of the objections to the previously rejected submission remain. This is not a suitable site for development.
Thank you very much, both of you, and yeah, spot on time as well. Thank you. If you'd like to retake your seats, please. No, I'm rushing ahead, aren't I? Sorry. Members may have questions of you. Councillor Lee. Where is that?
Along Loveton Lane, there is an EcoGen site which does recycling, which is about a mile further along Loveton Lane. Currently, there are 40 movements a day. In their wisdom, Hampshire County Council, despite 140 objections from local residents, because it's a very narrow road and having large HGVs going along it is not great, and there's not going to be 80 a day. So it's really frequent. And when one goes along, everyone has to stop. And if two of them meet, they go on the pavement. So it's not a quiet road. It's also a bus route.
Sorry, Councillor Lee, can I just check you've got your microphone on?
Yeah, sorry, beg your pardon. Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me now? Sorry, I don't know the site very well. Is there pavement on both sides of the lane?
No, one side.
One side. Thank you.
Sir Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a comment you made in regards to your your downstairs window that's soon to be a bedroom window. Is that correct? It just mainly in space and overlooking on sort of how close it is. If you could expand on that. I did visit the site yesterday just to have a look. It was difficult to sort of work out with the hedging there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a 6-foot fence between our property and 74. Which, as I said, belongs to us. The window from what is currently our dining room, that we intend to make into a bedroom, looks directly over there. So any vehicle going up and down there would cause noise, and any large vehicle reversing in there, they would be high enough up to look over the fence into our bedroom. Yes, it's only 1 metre gap between our house and the current boundary.
Questions? Then I can ask you now to retake your seats, and thank you for your contribution. Councillor Porter. You're the ward councillor, and
councillors know the neighbour very well, but we were very keen to make sure that the whole of that community was represented, not just that particular person. So that's why I'm speaking today.
thank you. You know the ropes, so please begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Ward councillors know the neighbours of this development, and Councillor Cromartin has already objected to this application online. And this objection is based on the adverse impact of the new house on all the neighbours and on the character and appearance of the area. We don't agree with the principle that backland development of this kind is typical in this area, as characterised by Mountbatten Place and Friars Close, as it says in the papers. Mountbatten Place was built on land partitioned off decades ago, linking to the main council estate with a 2-vehicle width entrance onto Fraser Road. Friars Close was developed from Long Gardens by the demolition of Lumsden Lane homes, using the space created as an entrance to the cul-de-sac. Both developments have a number of houses with ways out on foot as well, and distinct characters of their own. They do not detract from the Ribbon development of Lumsden Lane, and the only other buildings in the Long Gardens are sheds. Residents have defined the policy failures, so I won't rehearse those again. I appreciate that Windfall development within Winchester District delivers homes, but Windfall gain in the Worthies has been achieved by demolishing the original house on a plot and replacing with several on the same site. This creates a community with its own character and its own design code and makes efficient use of the land. Examples are Boxall Gardens, Springvale Rise, King's Close. This proposal doesn't achieve that. The Parish Council and Ward Council share the view that this application does not achieve a well-designed and beautiful place. In fact, we believe that it risks a new precedent for being able to shoehorn a property into the rear of another by using the small amount of side land as a narrow drive. This isn't sustainable. It is a dog-legged drive of barely 3 metres with high fencing and overhead wires, providing poor vehicle, pedestrian and emergency access, and as you can see, literally skims the house that exists there already. This development is a bungalow of disproportionate size to the plot. The design doesn't reflect the architecture of the front properties, with a different roof pitch to Friars Close homes nearby will feel uncomfortable and cramped and restrict light in their gardens, especially in winter months. The construction of this property at their rear may provide another home within the space, but it will result in 2 inferior properties, one at the front with a driveway touching the first house and one at the back with a cramped entrance. If 2 cars were parked in the space, there would be inadequate turning room for a delivery van. Larger vehicles will be forced to make multiple movements and reverse in and out from the drive, probably many bleeping as they go. The reversing noise of vehicles using the drive will change the character of the properties, disturbing neighbours at 72 and Friars Close, and actually the occupant of 74 as the drive brushes that house too. Choice of driveway material, currently gravel, is crucial as this noise will impact on neighbours at 72 and Friars Close. Hum from the air source heat pump may be heard by properties in Friars Close as well, potentially creating disturbance. Noise should be restricted by condition should this be passed. Noise and pollution from manoeuvring vehicles during construction and occupation will affect the health and well-being of neighbours. And the gentleman at number 72 has described how his wife has multiple sclerosis and he has COPD, and this will affect their health and well-being in the long term. Boundary treatments. In the section on neighbouring amenity, it's stated there'll be a close bordered fence on both sides of the drive. And as has been described, the distance between the plate glass window of number 72 and their fence is just 1.08 metres. The driveway, therefore, will be no more than 1.2 metres from their living room. When I visited number 72, and as illustrated in your photographs, a transit type van was clearly seen above that fence in the drive, which may be typical of the vehicles that will go to the site. Drivers of vans like this and larger could easily see over the fence into living rooms. Privacy for number 72 will be at risk. Finally, sunlight. The proposed hedges northwest and northeast are not within the control of the applicant, but the roofline will shade Friars Close gardens as the sun moves across the winter sky, and added trees that are being planted will shade the new garden in the summer. For all of these reasons, I object to the application.
Have any questions for Councillor Porter? Councillor Laming.
Thank you. You're talking about the width of the drive. Could you just clarify what you think the width of the drive is that they're putting in?
At the front, it's slightly wider, and in the main width going down the drive, it's 3 metres with a fence literally either side of that.
So that's 3 metres from the edge of the property to the.
It's marked on your plans between where it brushes the side of 76 and the join as 3 metres.
Yeah, so it's only just possible to get a fairly reasonable size vehicle out there.
Yes, I mean, from our work in other areas, 2 metres with wing mirrors is a tough call.
Yeah.
With 2 fences either side.
Yeah, that ends the question. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have the supporter of this application, I believe the agent, Mr. Dudley. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members. I'm the agent of this application. The site is within the settlement boundary of Kingsworthy, therefore development is acceptable subject to the usual policy criteria. The proposals are for a bungalow, which is single storey and as such has no first floor windows or with any windows within roof planes. Therefore, there cannot be any overlooking or privacy issues. The existing landscape features on the site are to be retained, including mature hedging and to the boundary to the north, which provides significant screening to the adjoining properties in Friars Close. The existing access onto Lofting Lane will serve a new driveway down to the new dwelling. The existing access achieves the correct visibility displays for the speed limit and has no additional impact on highway safety. The new driveway is sufficient width to serve a single dwelling and has turning areas within the site for cars and small vehicles. The proposed bungalow will be fitted with sprinkler system which complies with current building regs for fire access. The new dwellings provide garden and amenity areas and necessary bin cycles and all car parking with EV points. The gardens that are left to the existing 2 houses are all still in excess of 22 metres long. The overall development achieves the same density as the adjoining houses and the site is to be viewed in context of the surrounding area, which has changed. The bungalow will have limited impact and cannot be seen from the public views. There are no statutory objections from highways, ecology, drainage or landscaping. This is a policy compliant site and achieves the aims and objectives of MPPF and the local planning policies. The council's 5-year land supply is not a cap on development within settlement boundaries. In summary, this application provides an opportunity to integrate a new dwelling into the existing character and area that's been established. I trust that you will follow the recommendation and permit this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, do we have questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just I had a question in regards to, you mentioned the property will have sprinklers. I mean, that's not a typical sort of thing that we see come, you know, with a planning application for a single dwelling. Is that because the access is too small for fire service to go down there? I just want to sort of, if you could expand on that, that would be great.
Yeah, it's basically the access for in order to comply with building regs for a fire engine, the access is too narrow because you need 3.7. But the alternative way to comply is you fit a sprinkler system to the dwelling, which complies with building regs. I've done it on numerous applications around Hampshire and all over West Sussex. It's a way of complying if a fire engine can't get to the site. In all fairness, a sprinkler system will do a far better job because the sprinkler system will put the fire out before the fire brigade get there. So it is a recognised way of complying with building regs.
Councillor Lamy?
You say that you were going to use an air source heat pump, but we do have problems with the noise from these. Have you considered looking at ground source?
Problem with ground source is there's two ways of doing ground source. You either got to have a big field to dig up to put the ground source at a reasonable level, or you've got to go down. They're very costly to do. Obviously, I don't think you've got enough area to use ground source because you would probably find you need 3 times the site area to put a ground source one in. Air source is the only things we use nowadays because they are the best way. Obviously, we would look at the noise issue, and I've done various noise reports that we can do to justify the noise, and obviously we can enclose them if necessary to reduce the noise.
Are you going to enclose them? Because my experience of air source heat pumps is that when they're in close proximity to neighbours, is that they do upset people during the night when the windows are open.
They can be enclosed. It all depends on what noise levels they're emitting, which means that if you get a noise report done, then obviously you can then assess at what point you need to locate it. If we need to locate it somewhere else away from neighbours, then we can do that, or we can close it with some form of guard that can reduce the noise levels.
So are you looking at a zero carbon build on this?
It will be, at the moment, all our new developments that we do, it will be to current building regs, which is basically air source pumps and possibly solar panels if we need to do them to achieve building regs.
So you're not really making the installation as best as it could be?
We'll make it in accordance with the building regs, which is all at the moment we have to comply with, because Winchester at the moment don't have a policy.
Yes, we do. We have CP11.
That's what I think we know where we are on.
Yeah.
I was going to say, at the moment, we can only do what we can do to building regs unless the condition asks us to make it better. At the moment, building regs is already 30% better than what it was, so we're achieving pretty good with most councils. That is the standard that we're achieving.
Fine, that's your position. Now, when we're talking about the drive width, you say that you can't get a fire engine up there, so therefore you cannot get an ambulance up there if that was necessary.
The width of the driveway from a fire perspective is not wide enough because it needs to be 3.7. I'm unsure as to the width of a fire of an ambulance if it's the same as a fire engine. But if there needs to be an emergency vehicle down there, or a car or a small vehicle could get down there, but an ambulance couldn't.
Yes, I wonder if I could just go back to the air source heat pump. I was citizen advice advisor for 7 years, and it's manifest that air source heat pumps, if not appropriately located, can cause problems, mental health issues. So can you just tell me exactly what is the intent? Will you do a noise type investigation and then decide on where the location of that air source heat pump will be? And presumably, given the distance of this plot to the neighbouring properties, there'll be cost implications, I guess, to put it in the farthest point of the site. Is that a consideration?
Yeah, previous sites I've done before, we get a noise consultant to do a report which assesses the noise levels, and then he tells us where we need to put the air source unit. So once we get that done, we will put it obviously in the best place possible. If it has to go further away from the house, then it has to go further away from the house. So that will come from a noise report. If that has to be a condition, then we'll do a noise report and basically put the air source where it needs to go, or enclose it if it needs to reduce the noise. So we are open to putting it where it needs to go to avoid noise in the neighbours' gardens.
Any other questions? No? Then thank you very much for your presentation. Shall now move on to questions of the officer on her report. It's a relatively short document compared with some that we see, so I suggest that we take it as a single document, ask questions about anything. Anyone?
Yes, thank you. I wonder if you could just clarify for me. I think I'm probably going to answer my own question, but it's about biodiversity net gain. As I understand it, small properties were exempt until whenever it was, 4th of April. This was validated, this planning application, some time ago. So is there any retrospective biodiversity net gain that would apply to the site?
No, Chair. The biodiversity net gain requirement for major applications came in at the beginning of this year, and for minor applications came in at the beginning of this month. We always do try and encourage, irrespective of the biodiversity net gain statutory requirements, we always do try and encourage applicants to have some consideration for biodiversity in respect of maybe planting hedges, native hedges, or including bat boxes or bird boxes. But to answer your question, no, there's no retrospective requirement to apply biodiversity net gain to a development that was validated before the requirement came in.
Perhaps I could ask you a question. This is regarding the access track. Unfortunately, on my screen, and as far as I can see the larger screen, I can't read the figures. Could you clarify the width of the track at its narrowest point, which I think will be adjacent to the existing house, and also comment on the nature of the track, a gravel track to the house, whether we have any planning considerations about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that at its narrowest, the track will be 3 metres in width. Where it's adjacent to Loughton Lane, it will be 4.2 metres. And I appreciate it's a bit, the writing's quite small on the access plan, but also the visibility displays are shown there, and they are correct for a road that has a speed limit of 40 miles per hour. In terms of the surfacing of the track, I don't think we've got a particular surfacing set out at the moment, but condition 6 on page 28 covers hard and soft landscaping, including hard surfacing materials. So certainly within the remit of that condition, we can require an appropriate surfacing that's not going to cause disturbance such as gravel may do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that would be extremely helpful to address some of the concerns that we've heard. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Catherine, much is being made of this access track. Is it a standard width for an access, or is it narrower than it should be, or wider than it should be?
I believe, thank you, Chair. I believe it's a standard width. I think where I think the main issue that the commentators and the neighbours and members have got is to do with the turning head at the end of the track. The applicant's agent has already explained about fire appliances and the sprinkler system. I don't know about that. That's sort of not within my remit to do with the sprinklers. But there is room there to turn both cars and I would think smaller vehicles like delivery vans and so on. Again, I don't really know about ambulance widths. I can't really comment on that, but it is a standard width and it's been assessed and it's considered to be an appropriate layout and width for the type of development that is being proposed. Thank you.
Councillor Laming and then back to Councillor Pearce.
I'm concerned with the noise from the heat pump on that. Can we condition a maximum noise allowable, say 40 decibels, which is roughly the background noise that you would get at night?
Thank you, Chair. I believe our environmental protection team are in the process of writing a document because the government has changed the standards for air source heat pumps, so that they don't it avoids so much noise that we know that they can emanate from them. So if details of the heat pump are sent in, we can ensure that that would be of the noise would be of a level that's appropriate to its location in a residential setting. I think we could in the condition conditions 10 and 11, which cover pre-commencement energy and water calculations and pre-occupation energy and water calculations, we can stipulate within that the necessary requirements for the air source heat pump to ensure that it's of an appropriate level of noise for that session.
I mean, we have had problems in other areas where the heat pump has been making quite a lot of noise, even though it's supposed not to, and that's caused a lot of problems with neighbours. The other thing that comes to mind on this application is also where large vehicles will park when they're delivering or a fire engine or an ambulance because they couldn't get up the drive. On that, Lovedon Lane is a very busy road with a projected number of vehicles increasing, of heavy vehicles. Is there any provision to make sure that these vehicles can get off the road to unload or load?
Thank you, Chair. I think we've discussed ambulances and fire appliances, and the area, the turning area, would be appropriate for sort of delivery vehicles and vehicles of that ilk. Can't really add any more to that other than what I've already said. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, it's just that the Lovedon Lane is a particular bottleneck for heavies, and we need to be able to make sure that vehicles can get off the road to do their loading and unloading.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
I'll pass on it to Chair. What I want to say is probably best suited to debates than.
Yes, I wonder if we could just revisit sustainable drainage on page 25. I can read what it says, but and I know how the Environment Agency determines flood zones, but given the unprecedented climate change, warmer weather, higher rainfalls that we've experienced of recent, are we picking up on changes in pluvial flooding in this area? And noting what I think you said, there is a slope, and I appreciate there'll be suds. However, it does give me cause for concern. So are we confident that the situation in this local area hasn't changed since some of the identified flood zones have been identified?
Thank you, Chair. The standard drainage condition that is added to the application, that's worded fairly broadly. From experience, our drainage engineers do apply the latest flood risk or surface water risk measures, so 1 in 30 years, 1 in 100 years, and I think also do 1 in 15 years. So those are constantly updated, I think, by the Environment Agency and our own drainage engineers as and when they assess certain situations. So I'm quite confident that within the remit of that condition, our drainage engineer would be applying the most up-to-date flood risk, including surface water risk standards, to ensure that the proposed drainage is acceptable and appropriate for the nature of the development. Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to expand a little bit in regards to something that Councillor Porter brought up in regards to buildings at the rear of properties on Loveton Lane. From the satellite view and then the visit yesterday, I couldn't see, apart from any sort of larger developments such as like Friars Close, etc., any that were that had already sort of commenced or been put in the back gardens of those that front onto Loveton Lane. I was just wondering if you could sort of expand a little bit further on, because it does say it's acceptable due to prior development. I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit.
Thank you, Chair. The location of this development is adjacent to, and I know there's some disagreement with this, but it's adjacent to Friars Close development and other nearby sort of cul-de-sacs. So whilst it's not the same in terms of the layout, in terms of narrow dwellings that you would see on Friars Close, it does fit in with an area that's been previously developed to the rear of Loveton Lane. Perhaps the situation would be different if it was proposed further away from the Friars Close development, maybe numbers 80 or 82 in the centre of the Loveton Lane properties, because you only got small outbuildings there. But in this instance, due to its location, is considered to be acceptable. And we always assess applications on their own merits as well. So just because previously something might not have been allowed slightly further away on Loveton Lane doesn't mean that it automatically doesn't mean that all backland development is unacceptable. And also just to touch briefly on concerns about the previous refused scheme, which was for a pair of 2-storey dwellings with which was refused because it was 2 dwellings, because they were 2 stories, and because the design was out of keeping with the character of that area. And so the proposal now, which is for a 1-storey, fairly traditional bungalow, is considered to be quite low key and appropriate for that particular location. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, you have a follow-up?
Yes, just a brief follow-up. Just mentioning that obviously, if say this, I know we're looking at this application on its own, but would it set a precedent if we were to approve this application in, say, the neighbouring property then wants, say, another a bungalow adjacent? I'm just thinking of a creep sort of down Loveton Lane in back gardens. So I was just wondering if you could clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, we look at all development on their own merits. So because if this is approved, because it has been approved, doesn't mean that we're automatically going to say, right, the next plot down you can build a house and so on. We look very carefully at the location and the type of development proposed on its own merits. It would be a factor in assessing it, but it certainly wouldn't be absolutely, you can definitely build a house there.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I propose that we move to debate. Members? Councillor Lamy?
I think this is a very unusual development as such, because of the narrowness of the access. The floor area is the same as the previous application. Loveton Lane has an awful lot of very busy, heavy traffic. Anything that restricts that traffic is going to cause problems. I'm concerned with the noise level from the heat pump affecting the various neighbours, and at this moment in time, I don't see how I could approve this application.
Councillor Lee?
Yeah, I have multiple concerns about the widespread effect on neighbours. I think the shoehorning description I think is very apt in my mind, and also then scraping past the neighbours and the impact on the neighbours' quality of life, not least of all heat pumps, potentially vehicles. And then I again have concerns about the access for emergency vehicles, notwithstanding sprinklers and being compliant with fire regulations. So that's really concerning for me, and on that basis, I'm uncertain on how to think this through in terms of giving approval in my mind. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon-Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Right. I think the idea that there's visual damage to the ribbon development, I don't think it's very valid, because this is in the back, at the back, and you're not be able to see it. I think the traffic, at the moment, all the houses on the road, on Lovedon Lane, have access straight onto the main road, which is one of the reasons why planners hate ribbon development. However, 2 more cars coming on, I don't think it's a valid reason to turn it down, because after all, the neighbouring houses could each decide to buy 2 more houses and add to the traffic load. So I don't think there's any argument about that. I take the point that it's rather shoehorned onto this site. But you can imagine if it was already built, the sort of daily noise of the people there wouldn't be any worse than from Friars Close and so on. The thing I have a big problem on is on the access route in, and I think it's very unsatisfactory. And having traffic movement past people's back gardens, existing back gardens, and that sort of disturbance. People accept disturbance, traffic movement at the front of the house, but at the back, it's very unsatisfactory. I'm not sure about the point of the air source heat pump. I mean, I don't think the noise is huge from those. And in the winter, generally, you have your windows shut. But the reason I would, I think, vote against this is this problem of the unsatisfactory access route in down to this rear plot. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, we have one more. Can I just make an
Thank you, Chair.
mention myself?
Yeah, it strikes me there's a lot of angst about the access route to this and whether it should be designed for delivery vehicles. If we take that on board, pretty well the first in Winchester area, where the access has been dictated by the size of delivery vehicles. We've never done it before. You're in danger of rewriting the policies. The reality is that we're advised by the planning officer that it's a standard which access, and therefore could an ambulance get down there? Well, that's not unusual that an ambulance can't get to the front or back door of a house. That's the reality, and that anyone has got to be transported down on a gurney of some sort. It's not that unusual. Again, we're in very gross danger of rewriting the DM18, which is about access and parking, which don't cover this issue. Whether it should or not, it's not for us to decide on that. The other issue is about noise of the heat pump, and I find a degree of irony here, where one argument is we want houses to have heat pumps fitted, and another argument which is being presented here is, oh, we can't have this house because it's going to have a heat pump. Now, you can't have it both ways. You're either going to encourage the fitting of heat pumps in order for to take on board climate change and the climate emergency, or you're not. Now, it's not an unusual factor that there have been concerns that some houses are not suitable to have a heat pump fitted. Now, I'm not sure where that is within the planning policies about that. It is part of the FPPF, as I recall, or NPPF, that not every house can have a heat pump fitted, nor can every house have a ground source heat pump fitted either. That's the reality. There's an alternative, and they're called solar panels. If you wish this house to generate its own electricity. But again, you're in very close danger of going contrary to the policies of the city council. Again, you can't have it both ways. Now, it is a second submission. The profile of this building has been much reduced in order to so it doesn't have a visual impact on the surrounding area. The plans that we've got in front of us, the pictures that Catherine has showed us, show that this is going to be only going to see the tip of the roof behind the hedging, which is part of the landscaping. So again, that's not an issue. The other one concern is about groundwater. Well, have you looked at what Southern Water says about this? I'll repeat a few in case you haven't. Southern Water, no objection, subject to further details of the SUDS as part of the drainage condition. Now, if Southern Water, and I know we give them a lot of stick, are not concerned about drainage off the surface of this site, why are we suddenly coming up with this as an excuse? Now, I was brought up with the idea that a planning application should go through unless there's something specific in the planning policy that says it should not. Well, I don't know of any policy, and I'm looking at down the list that Catherine has quite nicely provided for us. There's nothing in those policies that I recall that says this application should not be granted.
Thank you.
Noise
very
of
much,
traffic going up and down the track. Oh, come on.
Councillor. I think you've made a very
Well, I've got 6
comprehensive-
cars on either side of me where I live,
No,
but it's just not a starter.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thank you.
I'm supporting Catherine's decision.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, I agree with many points that Councillor Pearson has brought up, and many of the questions that I had in regards to sort of the backfill aspect of the development have been answered. The only sticking point for me still is DM18. Part 2 of DM18 in regards to emergency access, but also it states in DM18 that the access must be, I think, amenable to not just the current owner but the adjacent land in regards to access as well. I'm fine with the access onto Lovedon Lane, but it's just the narrowness of that track, not for delivery vehicles, but for emergency vehicles. So that's the sticking point for me. So I'm currently inclined not to support the officer's recommendation, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. There's been a good debate, I think a rich debate around this. My view is that it is a significantly different application from the first, in the nature of being a single story rather than multi-story, 2-story building, and reducing overlooking and lack of deprivation of light. I am not convinced from looking at aerial photographs and also from walking around the extensive site that this plot of land would be out of character with the wider environment if an extra house were constructed as proposed. I do have considerable concern about the access issue, but as Councillor Pearson pointed out, and I think it's the case, there is a limit within planning law about what we can prescribe for how people arrange the access on over their own land to their own property. We have talked about strengthening the condition regarding access, for example, the surface of the driveway. We've talked also about reducing noise by exploring in the relevant condition the enclosure of the air source heat pump. My feeling is that we should support, and I shall be supporting, the officer's recommendation, though I accept it's a complex case. Are there finally any contributions before we move to a vote? No.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes. Chair, as we just discussed, I just wanted to confirm in the nature of if you're making, taking your decision, we can recommend an additional condition specifically about the air source heat pump, rather than looking at it through the conditions of 10 and 11, which looks at how we achieve certain sustainable levels. And that would look at the location of the air source heat pump. So we have details sent in to us, and then we can also ask for the noise specifications of it as well, which our environmental health team will be able to look at if that is a choice of the agent who wants to meet the code requirements through those methods which has been tabled today. So you would take your decision based on the recommendation to approve with that additional condition. And I think just there's been a lot of discussion and debate about the access, and from my point of view, Councillor Pearson has said a lot of things that I would say as well. For a site, a small infill site like this, we would normally expect the additional trips to be easily accommodated off Lovedon Lane with a lot of access onto that already. We wouldn't be expecting a one house site to be designing in a way that you would for a new major development area with adoptable standards for access, things like that. Things like that. Also, there are other alternatives which the agent pointed out in terms of emergencies. Is a situation a bit of buyer beware as well, if you're happy to live in a place where you can make alternative arrangements. And we can't control what happens off-site on Lovedon Lane in terms of delivery vehicles and things like that. So I'll leave that there. Thank you, Chair.
I wonder if I might just pick up on DM18 and referring to Councillor Pearson's comments. I'm looking at DM18 subpara 2 allows for access to and movement within the site in a safe and effective manner, having regard to the amenities of occupiers of the site and adjacent land and to the requirements of the emergency services. And that's where I'm having a problem. So whether you can help me to understand that you feel that we're going to be approving this, which is in terms of being compliant with that.
The areas that are really in our control for a site and a proportionate decision making in this case, condition 6 deals with it, where we're asking for hard servicing materials to make sure that the nature of that access is one that's appropriate given its close proximity to the neighbouring properties there, so that the surface is level, it's well drained, the materials appropriate, so there's no noise like the crunching of the gravel, etc. You can see that there's turning area there so that you can leave and access or egress onto London Lane in a forward gear. So it's those things that we would be considering would be the right ways of assessing this application for one unit onto that property. But backland development does cause or can be something that you're considering in terms of the neighbour impact, because you are taking vehicles by the side of houses. But that's not an unusual situation, as Councillor Pearson again did explain. And so that's the area I think that's more of concern for members through DM18 and the other DM policies in terms of designing for the intensity of that use, which is pretty low key, and the neighbours that are around, rather than trying to engineer a big solution that allows for all eventualities in terms of fire trucks, things like that. That would be really for a sort of adopted highway street placemaking.
Thank you very much. I think, members, we should move to a vote on this. May I see those in favour of accepting the officer's recommendation to approve? Those in favour? In favour? Yes.
That's 3, Chair.
And those against?
4, Chair.
This is therefore not approved. We need to agree the grounds on which we are refusing it. Councillor Williams?
And may I suggest DM18, specifically paragraph 2?
Chair, what we do have is the previous application was refused, and so some of a lot of the points that were in the reasons for refusal there, I think, are still appropriate here in listening to the debate, where the concern was obviously that had a more intensification of the use because there was 2 properties which would come with extra traffic trip generations and the intensity of use. and that concerns them regarding the layout of the site, the design of the dwellings. That isn't necessarily relevant here, but the proposed access also in terms of how that is designed and the vehicle access track. And that could then lead on to further concerns about the impact on the neighbours in the area. But I would be very concerned to have a reason for refusal that included DM18 in respect to not designing for emergency services, because that is inconsistent with how we would normally want to assess these applications. And I think that would be inappropriate, especially therefore unreasonable should that go to appeal. I don't know how we would possibly justify that. So I would suggest that we don't start looking at reasons to refuse about the access not being designed in a sort of engineered way to accommodate that. That isn't appropriate for most of our small developments in infill, and that we do look at DM18 in respect of how you're designing more generally, because it's backland development, the intensification and the impact on the surrounding uses.
I think also, members, if I may, through you, Chair, the point about emergency vehicles, you've heard half the answer. The fire trucks will park on Loveton Lane, and obviously with the sprinkler system is subject to building control in a parallel regime. Building control will ensure the delivery of the sprinkler system. So the harm element in a planning sense in relation to DM2, 50% of that argument is already dealt with in that parallel regime. That will leave you with essentially ambulances. Now, one can think of many circumstances in which ambulances, unfortunately, have to do travel with trolleys and gurneys to get to very difficult, inaccessible properties. In this particular instance, you've got dwellings on what is a typical road in a typical suburban environs. What harm would there be other than perhaps a trip, yes, admittedly with a trolley, to the back of a garden property? It's going to be very difficult to sustain, one would suggest, on DM2, given that the point that the fire truck element has been removed because of the building control regime.
Thank you very much. So,
If I may, Chair, sorry, it's more for me in regards to the where in paragraph 2 it says having regard to the amenities of occupiers of the site and adjacent land. Is the adjacent land in regards to the neighbours that the access? I'm quite satisfied that a fire hose could go down that road. It's more the adjacent land and the impact on the neighbours.
Again, that will be condition control, councillors. So if there's a concern about gravel, noise, the amount of vehicular movements, yes, the boundary we heard was 1.08 metres, I think, very close. But if it's gravel, yes, that will create amenity concerns. But we've heard that this will be discharged prior to commencement. So I think the officers have heard your valid concerns on this point. So when CAT comes to look at discharging those conditions, the surfacing of that access could be asphalt, tarmac, or some means of hard landscaping which reduces the noise concern here. So by amenity, is it the fact that you're concerned about vehicular movements along the side of where this access is, or is it the overlooking, in the sense that it may overlook, and we've heard about the living room changing to perhaps a bedroom. So you really do need to particularize what your concern is in terms of the amenity issues, because if we go to appeal, a lot of it could come out in terms of discharge conditions. The harm could go away and there'll be submissions on that point, and then we're left with trying to ferret around with what it is we're trying to grapple with your concern here. So members really do need to particularize what it is in terms of amenity concerns here, and then we can look at probably drafting a reason for you that is sustainable without risk of cost.
Councillor.
Thank you. The area of concern on that particular being so close to the neighbours is a really big issue for me, because we've got other properties where we've had backfill in and we've had drives right up this close to buildings. No matter what surface you put on them, it does cause distress for the people that live in that property that's that close. And I think we have a responsibility to the people that live that close as well. And that's the real area of concern on the access road, from my point of view.
Again, members, do realise that the fallback position is that this is being used already for the residents there. So arguments will be made that that property can be used in terms of its access up and down the side ad infinitum for their own residential. So there is a fallback position here that is a legitimate access way already. So to some degree, there is some impact. It's whether or not you could say that the impact is above and beyond to cause demonstrable harm in a planning sense for DM2. And if members are insistent on that, we've heard what you're saying. We can draft something accordingly, but obviously there is a potential risk of costs here, and that reason could arguably be unreasonable. And it's right that obviously we bring that to your attention because you also have a duty towards the public purse, and protecting obviously the public purse when we come to appeals and defending appeals.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But I also think that we've got to take into consideration all the factors, taking into account the other reasons for refusal that we had before, and this could be just an add-on.
Thank you, Councillor. I think the officers have heard the point, and we can draft it. The amenity concerns are to do with noise about that track and the movement rather than overlooking. And if you're wholly convinced beyond, you know, the balance of probabilities here that is the case, you've heard the potential cost implication. The officer can take it away, and we'll draft accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. We have, however, also an objection, I think, on the basis of the overall design scale and intensity of the development and its appropriateness in this particular location.
So there's a lot in there, Vice Chair, if I may. We need to unpack that. Is it the fear of precedent? Is it the fact that there's backland development, guarding, grabbing, whatever you want to call this? Is it not conducive to the locale in terms of urban grain and built form? There's a lot there. Is it the actual design? Remembering that there's a previously refused scheme here for 2 stories and 2 dwellings, and obviously the impact has now been reduced. There's a lot. So we really do need to unpack that whole concept of overdevelopment and what you actually mean.
Chair, from what I've heard, I think we're looking at because the position of the property to the rear of the existing properties of Lovedon Lane, and the fact that it's in that position to the rear, leading the access along to the sides of the properties, leads to sort of an overdevelopment of the site and the spread of the site across it. And the position of the turning areas and the parking spaces adjacent the rear private properties or private usable areas of people's garden is giving rise to concern in respect of amenity issues, which is reflected in DM 18 in regards to the access, amenities of occupiers, which is DM 18 and 2, and then also being linked to the wider policies of DM 16 and 17, I think, as well, which looks at the general place. So we're talking about, because of the location of the property, the location of the access, location of that turning area, adjacent the sort of quiet, private, usable areas of gardens is perhaps what you're thinking there, which Dan is obviously asking you to focus in respect of if you're going to take a vote to refuse the application.
I think, Chairman, Vice Chair, if I may, so DM 16.1, development which accords with the development plan will be permitted provided it responds positively to the character, appearance and variety of the local environment within and surrounding the site in terms of its design, scale and layout. You say it fails somewhere in that criterion. Where?
Councillor Gordon-Smith, you look as if you're on the cusp of an intervention.
Yeah, I think in terms of what you're saying, when you're looking at the context and when you're designing and looking at the spatial urban grain of it, this property is I don't like using the term backland, but it is to the rear of existing properties of Friars Close and also Lovedon Lane there. on both sides of Lovedon Lane. So yeah, responding to the context, what you would be saying is you don't think it's contextually appropriate to put a property in that location because of the gardens around it, which would give rise to those amenity issues.
That's as far as
That, yeah, I agree. I think it's as far as we can go, and it does reflect some of the reasons for refusal on the previous application. So I think that's appropriate, and that's one that's much more easily able to be evidenced, I think, if it went to an appeal.
Thank you very much. So we are focusing our objection on the appropriacy of the or inappropriacy of the location in this particular context. We're making reference to DM2, DM16 and DM17 as areas.
That's right. So we've got DM16-1, which is about the response to the context, and DM18-2, which is about the immunity of the access itself.
Right.
I think that's.
So members, are we in agreement that I need to see a vote that we are in agreement with those reasons for refusal? Those in favour?
Up 4, 5.
And against? And abstaining?
1 abstention.
Right. Thank you. That case is
So we now turn to the next item on our agenda, item number 7, and that is at the Manor House, High Street, Twyford. And this application has come to committee because the applicant is an elected member of the council. So our presenting officer is Drew Blackman. Over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, members. As said, this application is before us under our scheme delegation. It would ordinarily be delegated to officers, but we need to have it in the public forum for a determination. The application itself is at the Manor House, which is, if you look centrally to the plan up there, is the one that's with the red outline and the hash, together with the monastery. Used to be one property, since separated into 2. And the application is for listed building consent for works to the bathroom internally. So this photograph shows you the outside of the property, so you can get a feel for it. The works themselves, these are existing photographs. The works are to remove the partition wall, which you can see with the painting on it, next to the banisters, and to rationalise and amalgamate the 2 separate shower room and bathroom together as one, which, as you can see on the plans here, that's the existing arrangement where we have shower room and bathroom. The proposal is to move that partition wall back to introduce more landing, which is a benefit in terms of the character of the property, and taking the opportunity whilst doing the works to introduce acoustic and fire insulation in between the joists, between the property and because it's a flying freehold, the other property that's below it. Heritage Advice has supported that, and we've got conditions that would protect against any potential damage that might occur as a preventative measure. And during the course of the application, we have sought an amendment, an improvement, we believe, which was the retention of the door, which you can see in this picture here. It's an existing door, and we wanted it to be kept as part of the project. The applicant has willingly incorporated that into the bathroom, and on that basis, we recommend approval of the application.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
Chair.
Thank you. So we have no public speaking, so we go straight to questions to our officer. Members, do we have any questions for our planning officer, please? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Yes, I've noted the opportunity to enhance the property in terms of its fire characteristics and so on. I was just curious to understand, why wouldn't we enhance the thermal insulation as well above the area of work? Is that not something that's been would be possible, and should we consider that?
Just to clarify, do you mean to this is the first floor, so would you mean to the ground floor property?
Yeah,
between the two?
Yeah.
That's outside the remit of this application, because it'd be a different ownership. It's a flying freehold situation.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not an expert in these matters, but if you are insulating with fire insulation and introducing new acoustic, I would consider that there's going to be a thermal benefit to the application. Yeah.
Okay.
If there are no more questions, if you could just turn off your microphone, please, Councillor Lee. Thank you. We move to debate. Is there any debate, members? No debate. So we move to the decision. This application is presented to committee for permission. Can I see all those in favour of the officer recommendation, please?
That's 8 unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. We will now break for that application is approved. Thank you. We will now break for coffee and we will return at 11:15. Thank you. Good, and welcome back to today's planning committee. It's 11:15 on the 17th of April. The next item on our agenda, item number 8, has been deferred for legal reasons from the agenda and will be coming to a later planning committee, and that date will be communicated in due course. So we now move to item number 9 on our agendas, which is an application for the erection of a stable block containing 6 stables, tack room and small hay barn at Tanglefoot Farm, Livery, Hensting Lane, Fisher's Pond. And our presenting officer is not Cameron Taylor, but in fact Liz Young. So if you could take it away, please, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as mentioned, this application relates to seeks to retain a stable block which has been added to an area of equestrian land off Hensting Lane in Fisher's Pond. Just moving to the first slide, this is the location plan for the site. The purple hatching indicates the location and footprint of the application building, which is a 6 loose box stable. It lies in open countryside and is accessed off Hensting Lane, which is an unclassified highway which lies just under 100 metres off to the west. So it's accessed by a track which runs along the north boundary of the site, which is also a public right of way. Just move the cursor. So the former stable buildings which lie at the front of the site no longer form part of the equestrian use, as permission was granted for these to be converted to offices back in 2019. The site itself isn't adjoined by any residential properties, although there are dwellings off to the west and further to the north. So this next slide shows the layout of the site with the application building identified in red. It sits on the western edge of an wider area of grazing land, which amounts to about 14 acres, and this is indicated by the blue line. The grey rectangle, which you can see just here, is a riding arena, which is separated from the building by a steep vegetated bank. Just moving on to the next slide, this is an aerial view of the site before the building was introduced. So the yellow triangle indicates the location of the stable. This next slide just shows an aerial view of the building now in place. The red line indicates the route of public footpath number 17, which runs along the north boundary of the site. This next slide just shows the east elevation of the building, which is where its main entrance is located. Overall height measures just under 3 metres, and it's clad in timber, and the roof it consists of metal corrugated roofing. This shows a view looking towards the north elevation of the building, which is where the entrance to the hay store is located, the hay store being part of the main building. The riding arena lies immediately to the right, so just beyond the steep bank that you can see. This next view just shows a view from the parking area looking back towards the stable. So this parking area is off to the northwest of the building and lies just off the right of way and the main track. This is the view as you approach the site, so coming along the track and the right of way, coming from Hensting Lane to the west. This is view looking towards the east elevation and the main entrance to the stable building, so taken from the adjoining grazing land. This is just a longer range view looking back towards the building, which is approximately in this area here where the cursor is. So this is taken from the east, just off the main track, which runs along the north boundary. This view is again from the east as you approach towards the site along the track. So the building is, you can just see beyond the fence line in the distance. This is the view of the building which you'd have from the riding arena and the office block. So this is southwest elevation of the building. This is just another view looking towards the north elevation and the entrance to the hay store. And this is the view from the south, looking back towards the south elevation of the building from the adjoining grazing lands. This is another view as you approach the site coming up the track. So the riding arena is immediately to the right. So this is where it passes the riding arena. You can just see the stable building there to the right hand side. This is the view with the riding arena in the foreground, again looking towards the stable building, which you can just see up here. And this is just a view from the access track, but looking towards the former stable building, which is converted to offices. So this building fronts onto Hensting Lane. And this is view as you approach from the west, so from the access from Hensting Lane as you pass the office building on your right, going towards the application site. This is just a view from Hensting Lane, so from a different access of Hensting Lane, but looking towards the application building. So we're looking northeast. So the building is in this approximate location up here. And this is a view, another view from Hensting Lane. So this is looking southeast. Again, you can just make out the application building. The stable in the foreground is not part of the same site. And this is a floor plan of the building. So its overall footprint, external footprint, is approximately 210 square metres. Consists of 6 loose boxes. The conditions set out in the report would limit the overall number of horses to be stable to 6. And these are just some internal views of the stable. That brings us to the end of the slides. So just to conclude, it's considered that the proposed development is in accordance with the relevant development plan policies, as it serves an ongoing equestrian use which has an operational need to be an open countryside. It's considered that it's been designed to be closely related to existing development on the site and to minimise visual intrusion. So it's recommended that permission should be granted subject to the conditions set out in the report. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. We now move to public speaking, and our first registered speaker is David Lariche. David, welcome. I think you've been here before, have you? No? Yes. So you know how to switch on the microphone, and you have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The application was submitted in response to an enforcement action. This related to the creation of the new commercial livery yard, together with hard-standing car parking and the removal of trees and hedgerows. The entire area that the site now sits on was previously paddocks and countryside. However, the submitted application is only for the building itself. It specifically excludes the hard standing that was created to provide the car parking and lorry storage and the access to it. In total, the hard standing is around 20,000 square feet, which, to put in context, is about a third of the size of an international football pitch and fronts directly onto the public right-of-way. The works were undertaken and completed immediately prior to the stables construction, as the location of the stables could not previously be accessed without it. It involved the removal of mature hedgerows and trees that formed a landscape screen that complied with a planning condition relating to the use of the outdoor arena that forms part of the livery facility. The submitted application drawings do not show any of the new yard standing or how the building accesses the public highway. These areas were shown as fields and paddocks. I think the case officer's photographs clearly demonstrate that this is not the case. Mr. Cameron's report also makes the point on page 6 that these areas are excluded from the application and that they have been created without planning approval. But as they fall outside the submitted red line, they cannot be considered as part of this application. As the stables and the livery yard cannot function or be accessed without these areas, the question has to be asked, why are they excluded from the application? And why are they not included on the submitted drawings? I'm an architect, 40 years experience of working in the planning system, and it's safe to say I've never had a project that's been considered where the building is considered separately to the areas around it that it actually requires to operate and that form the access to it. It's a bit like considering a new Tesco supermarket and saying we're looking at the building itself, but we're not looking at the car parking, the access to it, or the service area that services it. So I would therefore respectfully ask that the committee consider the application in light of this and to reflect if the building can be considered in isolation, particularly as the surrounding areas and the access do not have planning permission and remain the subject of an ongoing enforcement notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any questions of clarification for Mr. Lariche? No, I think you were very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We now turn to Councillor Susan Cook, who is the ward representative. The ward councillor, I beg your pardon, Sue. You know the routine, Sue. Welcome. And you have up to 5 minutes when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, fellow councillors, officers and members of the general public and the press. Thank you for allowing me to speak about this application, or should I say a retrospective updated description application. Now, anyone in this room will know me, that will know I am not a supporter of retrospective planning applications. But this, let me put it this way, it's a little different. And I will say from the beginning of my supportive statement, I am in agreement with the planning officer and their decision to approve and recommend this for approval. But I don't mind saying it wasn't an easy decision to make. And it took me some time. I read the 18 objections far and wide, as I read the 25 far and wide as well. But the one objection that did stand out on the portal was prepared by Proclaris Consulting on behalf of PPEDS, formerly Hampshire Riding Therapy Centre, which I may say was an excellent presentation to the policies and the references it referred to of the local plan. With reference to other comments regarding a kebab vans, it wasn't plural, it was one, should never have been put there. And I think it was because the applicant felt they were trying to do the community-minded, spirited thing. And if anyone follows Colton Common on Facebook, you'll know that the kebab van has been a topic of conversation for many months, all because of what's been going on with Southern Water in a lay-by. But the applicant thought they were doing the right thing. To be honest, wasn't a wise decision. The area in question should only be for parking of visiting owners of their horses and conveyancing boxes, not caravans or other cars. And as for the caravan, as I've mentioned, this area has been mentioned on many objections. Upon my visit, I did 2 visits, in fact. One was announced and one was not, because it's a public footpath and I can wander up there and have a look round. It has been mentioned also in the objections regarding other livery yard further down the track. That's not up for debate today. What's up for debate is the 6 boxes for the horses. Now, as I say, I initially started my time by confirming that I'm not a fan of supporting retrospective planning applications. And there is history of communication with Winchester City Council, which in fact goes back to 2020, but I will allow the applicant to give you more information on that. Colden Common Parish Council made no objection and made no comment. Many of the objections referred to the way in which the land was natural and a place of beauty. It referred to trees being removed and shrubbery. I think I'd like to make the committee aware that what about the fridges and the batteries and the gas cylinders that had been left behind, and the 5 visits of a local endorsed company that needed to come and actually take those items away once the applicant bought the land, which is very disconcerting for someone to say they've been looking after the land, but clearly it hadn't. It refers to in the objections of MTRA 3 and 4, which knows, I think it's a new development should be appropriate in scale and design. This is a modest 1-storey high stable block. It refers to the removal, as I say, of hedgerow and trees. 35 native trees have been already planted, and there are a further 20 to be planted as well. It also mentioned in the report some of the objections as a contravention of policy DM12, reference to equestrian development, that has been covered by the planning officer. There's a reference that there wasn't a biodiversity net gain report. No details were submitted. I thought that was something that should be submitted. Climate change statement said it wasn't reported, but there was a carbon footprint and the officer was happy with that. It refers to water runoff in the report, and we all know that Hensting Lane does have some severe flooding issues, but that's down to landowners looking after their ditches, not about this planning application. It was also mentioned that the plans were submitted in a incorrect scale. When they were submitted originally in 2020, they may have been wrong, but they have been changed. So as I say, I've sat here and spoken about what's right and what's wrong. They've also accused the applicant of removing extra shrubbery to a meterage of 10, and the applicant is already willing to make sure that that is put back in place, but they still need to have access for emergency vehicles. The lights have been mentioned. They were told it was 9 o'clock, but in fact it's 8 o'clock, and they will adhere to that. Conditions do need to be put upon this, and I still go with what the planning officer has said, which is to recommend for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. Members, do we have any questions or clarification for the councillor? No? Thank you very much, sir. You may return to your seat. Thank you. And our final public speaker is Paula Johnston, who's the supporter. Welcome. And when you're ready, you will have 3 minutes, and the microphone is switched on by just pressing the button at the front, but there's no rush when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. My name is Paula Johnston. I grew up in Osselbury and I now live in Twyford. Anybody that knows me knows I'm an outdoor person. I'm a countryside person, and I really wouldn't ruin a natural spot of beauty. Tanglefoot's purpose was for us to enjoy our own horses and other people to be able to enjoy theirs, and also make it a safe environment for people to get educated with these animals as well. The planning, we are not into breaking any legislation. We started our communications in February 2020, which is when our offer was accepted for this land. And we put in a pre-application with Rose Lister. We had the references given to us. It went forward for planning and it was declined because we were told there were already existing stables, but this wasn't the case because that wasn't part of our land and that had been converted now into offices. So at this point, unfortunately, COVID hit, which made the communication levels really hard and normal operating practices under stress. So after speaking to Rose Lister, it was suggested we did retrospective, and the stables were built for the welfare of the horses. So I really want to make it clear we didn't want to go down the retrospective route, but that was the route that we were suggested that we followed in the end. As for the complaints, where do I start? Like I said, the land that we actually proposed to put our stables on, we have receipts and evidence that I don't doubt the charity. I know the charity. I used to use them and I used to ride with them. They put a lot of money and effort in planting trees and flowers. But when we bought the property, They'd already hit hard times. The land had been empty for several years, and the trees were no longer there. We had the sales PDFs from when we were looking at the property. It shows the same pictures that were put in the reports against us. There are no trees, there are no grown hedgerows where we have put this property. There were no flowers. It was overridden with ragwort. So we have spent a lot of time and money making this into a natural beauty spot, and we will continue to do that. The planning for the lights and everything that has come to my attention. Unfortunately, we were told that it was 9 p.m. that lights would be turned off by Hampshire Riding Therapy Centre. We are amending that. We will abide by the rules. Liz has kindly sent across to us the planning for this as well. The entranceway to the school, again, we lost our entrance to the school because that is part of another person's property. So we did remove 10 metres, which we weren't understanding that that was meant to be for screening. So we've measured.
I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Please, if you could just stay and see if members have got any questions of clarification. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wonder if I could ask you to comment on the loss of ecology, which has been picked up, I think, in terms of representations. Talked about 35 trees and 20 to come and so on. We have a nature emergency, so we need to get nature back into recovery, as I'm sure you're fully aware. So can you just comment on that, and what is your intent to remedy that, please?
No, certainly. So as the track from this picture, as you can see the track that goes up on the side that the stables are built, there is a bank all around the school, and at some point Hampshire Riding Therapy Centre did build in some hawthorns, and it does say oak trees. There was nothing there, so what we have done is we have spent 2 years making that soil good. We're working with A.E. Roberts, who are a nursery based in Durley. They've 117 years experience. We're taking their advice on what plants and trees would take to this land, and like I said, we've already planted 35. We've got 20 other native ones, and we're putting in more hawthorn and more hornbeam as well.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No? Thank you very much indeed. If you could switch off the microphone as you go, and Councillor Lee, if you could switch off yours too. Thank you. Very good. Liz, do you want to add anything following the public contributions?
Yeah, just the one point really. The main thing is we have to just assess the application that's before us, i.e. everything that is within the red line. So that is the stable itself. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move to questions on the whole report. I've got a question which really was raised by Mr. Lariche. Can you just explain how it is possible to look at the stable block in isolation without looking at any of the access issues or any of the other issues around it that I know are subject to enforcement action at the moment? If you could just explain that to me.
Yeah, no, we'd accept that usually a stable block in most cases would come with something like a concrete apron and access to and from the site. In this case, obviously, there is already an access track in place, which has historically been used to serve the equestrian use. And in this case, the stable itself is serving that ongoing equestrian use. So I think that's where the officer report is coming from. Obviously, depending on the decision and the outcome of committee today, if there are any unauthorised elements such as the hard surfacing, they'd need to take a view as to whether it would be expedient to enforce against any other aspects. That would be a separate consideration to this application.
Okay, thank you. Members, questions? Councillor Pearson.
Yes, Liz, I'm a bit puzzled exactly where the curtilage is for this site. Are we just talking about the area that's coloured in, well, you said purple, it looks like red to me, but that's my eyes.
sorry, just going back to it's purple on the location plan, but red on the site layout plan, just to clarify. But yeah, if you're talking about curtilage, I mean, that's a different issue to the use. So obviously the main issue is the stable serves an equestrian use, which from my understanding from the applicant takes place over about 14 acres of grazing land. So the stable accommodates 6 horses which are grazed on a wider area of about 14 acres. So the main issue is the use that it serves and obviously the nature of that use. So as I say, we'd limit that.
Yes, Chair, I recognise we're looking at the stable block, but I wondered if there was any link. One of the issues came up was about the lighting, but that's not lighting associated with the stable block, is it?
Right, so
It's the exercise area, surely.
There is a condition.
That's right, yeah.
So all these questions actually are covered in the conditions, I think, Councillor Pearson.
So why is the lighting an issue if we're only talking about the stable block?
So on the conditions set out in the report, there is a condition which says that no external lighting shall be introduced without us agreeing the details. So there's that, and then separate to that, there's a restriction on the riding arena which controls when the floodlights can be used, i.e. what hours they can be turned on and off.
Yes, because that's the park's dark skies policy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I recognise that.
So there's 2 separate sort of lighting issues.
So the 2 issues we're looking at, are we, or
No,
just?
No.
I'm a bit. This is why I raised the question, because the lighting doesn't seem to be associated with the stable block, but you said quite rightly we're only talking about the stable block, but not
That's
the
right.
lighting.
Yeah, so with the stable block, we are recommending a condition limiting the right to introduce external lighting without agreeing those details first with us.
Right, okay.
This is lighting that's attached to the outside of the stable block.
Yes.
Councillor Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I see the objection from Hampshire County Council, and I see that we've addressed that largely. But one of the questions, I may have missed it, is the concern about the intensification of vehicle use along the footpath. I wonder if the officer can just expand on that and explain, is that an issue or a non-issue, please?
Yeah, mainly we'd consider it against the background number of vehicle movements. So from looking back, well, the 2 main ongoing uses, I guess, are the equestrian use and also the consented office use within the building. So when the office conversion was under consideration, the countryside access officer did object at the time for the same reasons, and that was then also considered as part of that application. The applicant at the time for the office conversion submitted more information about the previous equestrian use that had been ongoing. So that was also a commercial use which generated, well, it was about 11 staff and about 100 car movements a week, and also various other associated vehicle movements. So considering this use, which relates to 6 about assisted and DIY livery horses, in comparison to that previous equestrian use and also the ongoing office use, it's not considered that this level of use would intensify vehicle movements over and above what's occurring at the moment to a harmful level.
Are we talking about a footpath or a public right of way, which is not necessarily the same thing?
It is a public right of way.
So it's
not a permissive,
it's footpath plus.
Formal public right of way. Yeah, it's not a permissive route.
I think it's a driveway with a right of access.
So it's a shared track.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions, members? If not, we will move to debate. Well, perhaps I'll kick things off. This is a retrospective application. which really none of us like, but we're not supposed to take that in bad odour, really. And I think given the unusual circumstances and the times that we were living in when this was all happening, it's understandable. So I'm glad that it's now all coming under the proper planning umbrella. I am understanding of the concerns of local residents and others who have been objecting. But I do think that the conditions that are part of this application and will be strongly implemented by the council and by the applicants cover most of the, in fact, all of the concerns that have been raised about biodiversity, replacing missing hedging and trees and so on, the lighting concerns and so on. So I do think that over time that will all be addressed and made good. So I think bearing that in mind, I am content to support the officer recommendation. Any other contributions to debate? Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. I am concerned with this because we're not covering the whole site, and there is applications for enforcement on the other parts of it. We should really be looking at it as a whole entity, and that does concern me. If we're just looking at the stable block, I concur with what's been said by you, Chair, but I do feel that we should be looking at the whole of the area as a joint thing, because otherwise it's disjointed and we can end up in all sorts of problems.
As you know, Councillor Laming, we do have to look at the application as it is before us, but thank you for your point.
Yes, that's why I'm querying the application.
No, I understand that. Debate, thank you. Yes, Councillor Gordon Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, the building itself is pretty innocuous. It's a stable, standard issue, looks all right, and I'm happy to accept this. But I know it's outside the issue, but it's always the mess you get around it of old tractors, storage of vehicles, and quite frankly, the poor treatment, and I think a lot of lack of knowledge about how to maintain a landscape, which always degrades the area where horses are. Thank you.
Councillor Pearson.
Good, Chair. I mean, Councillor Laming and the last speaker has just mentioned one of the confusing things I have about this. But if we're just talking about the stable block, which I'm assured we are, whether that's right or wrong, that's what the application is about, then one's got to look at it from the various points that Liz or whoever wrote your report, I don't know if it's Cameron and you. It's a team effort, right? Okay. The photographs around, I mean, what they're concerned about is in the park is whether it's a prominent building within the area. And quite clearly, the photographs show it isn't. It is a sustainable building in the sense it's made of wood. Okay, not the roof, but that's a waterproof roof, which is important for a stable block. A little bit concerned about the lighting because of the Dark Skies Reserve, which is mentioned on page 123. But that the National Park does not seem to have raised an issue over this, which I find a little bit surprising. But they haven't, and they are the people who are going to pull this application if we don't satisfy their demands.
Condition 7 does cover all external lighting.
Yeah, okay. Are you saying shut up or what?
No, I'm just reassuring you, I hope.
Sorry, Chair. I'm sure you used to be taught to shut up. No, truthfully, I don't see the issue. The problem with one of the things mentioned is 100 vehicle movements within a week, but there's no clear statement that that actually is related to the stable block. You've got a series of offices and stuff here, and some of those vehicle movements are going to be related to that. Indeed, one of the photographs shows the car park outside those offices. So that tends to confuse the whole issue. I don't see any problem with the stable block per se, but I have to say, and I notice the conditions have raised this issue about the lighting to the stable block, although I suspect the lighting is more related to the exercise area, and this makes it a bit murky. But the stable block, you can control that. The light, I'm a little bit nervous in the light of what happened to me opposite where I live, where planning inspector turned down lighting and they introduced mobile lights, which is fine. And I thought, no comment. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen here. Just looking at this application, I have no problem with this application, and I enjoyed reading the team's report and covered all the points as far as I'm concerned, even as far as the manure and anything coming off the manure, which is important because you've got the pond just downstream from here. And if that's contained, and apparently conditions to make sure it is, I'm happy with it.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Lee.
Yes, just to echo Councillor Lamming's points, it's unfortunate that we've arrived where we've arrived at with respect to several aspects, and we can only consider one part of that. But I'm satisfied the conditions are strong enough to alleviate some fears. And can I congratulate the case officer? It's the first time I've seen in the informatives reference to the nature emergency, and I think that's really important. I look forward to seeing that in future planning documentation, and I'm heartened by the applicant's comments about what's going to be done. So that's very concerning. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no more contributions to debate, this application is recommended for approval. So can I see all those in favour of approval, please?
7, Chair.
And those against? And abstentions?
1, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that application is approved. We will now